my name's James Taylor. I'm the regional throws coach for the north of England. I've probably been throwing 25 years now, but I've only been coaching for the last 3, so still new to all this coaching. But I've picked up quite a bit from the years of throwing, and hopefully today is just a way of passing on some of the things that I've seen and I do as part of kind of coaching for my club, as well as on a wider spectrum. Hopefully you're going to enjoy, you're going to get something from this, even if it's just one nugget of information that helps you. That'd be brilliant. And as Nick said earlier, if there is any questions, just flag them up and hopefully I can help you with those. So hopefully by the end of the webinar, we should have touched on 4 basic drills that we tend to use with athletes. I think these are quite well known. First of all, we'll look at the standing throw, into a pivot, which is just a bit of a half turn, then into a South African or a running turn, as some people might have heard of it, and then finally ending up in a full turn. One of the things we'll try and touch on for each of those is that we'll understand some of the key cues and what you maybe should look out for when you're teaching and showing athletes how to use these drills. One of the things that I've kind of come to understand with throwing, just in general, is that not all throwers are the same, and everyone's got different styles and different ways of approaching the throw. But fundamentally, there's certain things that each thrower's got to do, no matter what, to get the basics right. And so that's just something to bear in mind when we're coaching. Yes, everyone's going to have a different way of styling everything out as part of their throw, but as long as we hit the same key basic points on each part of the throw, hopefully we should end up being successful in what we do. So I thought first thing we could look at is things that we need to consider when we're coaching a throw, especially discus. So first thing is keep it simple. Only try and, I'm sure you all know this already, but keep the coaching points to a minimum, so maybe 1, maximum of 2 at a time. I find with my athletes, they just blow up if I tell them to do much more than one thing at a time. It fries the brain. It does me, to be fair. So I think that's the same with everybody. And then, yeah, if we're starting from fundamentals of a throw, because I don't know what level the athletes that you're looking to coach the discus are at. Some of the key things, we're going to look at how they hold the discus, making sure they're not gripping it and they've got the fingers around it. And also the orbit of the discus as well is always quite key. Rather than having it tucked into the pocket, we need his arms nice and long, because we're want to create as wide an orbit as possible to generate more speed on delivery. That's what we're ultimately looking for in discus throwing, is having the maximum speed and power at that point of delivery. I think discus especially is one of those events where you do need rhythm. And as I said earlier, you need to kind of hit those key points through the throw to generate that speed and power through the throw. I think you'll see some throwers that they'll come in and they'll try and just muscle it or arm the discus. And what we try and get them to do is use the rest of the body before their arm comes through. And that tends to generate the better results. And then probably one of the key things to consider is the condition of the athlete and what stage they're at in training age sort of thing. So you might get an athlete that's a senior athlete, but because of their conditioning, so they might not be very strong, or they might not got the mobility, they might find it very difficult to work with the weight of the implement that's for their age group, for example. So I sometimes get some students or maybe like young adults that are coming in, and the weight that they're supposed to be throwing, say, for example, a 2 kilogram discus might be a little bit too heavy for them. So rather than making them punish them with that 2K discus to adapt to it, I often get them to do the drills with maybe a lighter 1.5 or a 1.75 discus. To get them to get the movement patterns right, and then we'll gradually increase the weight once they've got used to that. There's a little diagram as well at the bottom of that page, just to kind of give you an idea of what if I ever refer to 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or 6 o'clock, or 9 o'clock, to get the athlete to face that way, we kind of divide the circle up into those areas like a clock. 12 being towards the back of the circle, 6 o'clock being to the front of the circle, just so that I don't, if I start rabbiting on about time, you're not confused by it's 8:10. So hopefully that's okay. First bit, fundamental one, is holding the discus. It seems a very simple concept, but so many people, athletes that I come across, get this wrong, and they carry the discus in a very wraparound. They've got the fingers. So if you look at the picture on the right with the big cross on, they've got their hands, the fingers wrapped around the discus because they're scared that it's going to fall out of their hands. Whereas actually we don't really want that. We want the fingers just to be over the edge of the discus. The wrist, just the discus just off the wrist, and not cupping it and keeping their arms long. The biggest thing you'll often see, especially with people who've never thrown it before, is they're scared to drop it, so they hook the fingers around it, they bend the wrist, and they keep their arms short. And that's really away from where we want them to be, is get that nice flick off the fingers. So what I tend to do is a few drills to kind of get them comfortable holding the discus and get them confident that it's not going to fall out. So I've got first one. What I tend to do is get them to put the discus in the hand and just have it held in by the side. It's just holding onto the fingers just enough, and then maybe get them to swing their arm in a bit of a pendulum fashion and get them comfortable that discus isn't going to fall out. That's kind of that fundamental one. The next one, and there is clips of this, is rolling a discus, like in the style of a crown green bowler. You know, when they bend down and they flick it off their index finger. What you should then see is the discus rolling along the grass, for example. These are good drills that you can actually do in a relatively safe manner as a group. So if you've got a group of young throwers or old that are just they're learning this, you can actually, rather than doing it one at a time, you can actually have several athletes spaced out along the side of the field and get them to practice just rolling the discus and getting it to flick off the finger and roll across the grass. So it just gets them used to that release in a relatively safe way, and without having to think about throwing as such. They're just rolling it. And then you can then evolve that again and get the athletes to practice releasing the discus at a shoulder height and creating a spin. So stand facing the field, for example, and get their arm high, hold the discus in the left and right hand, so the left hand underneath supporting it, and then just bring the discus back and then pull it through and release. And all we're looking for there is not to throw it far, because everyone's always competitive, has to throw it far. Just remind them, just all we're wanting is that nice spin to come off the flick of the index finger and get it to cast out. You tend to find after probably 3 or 4 goes at that, as long as they're not trying to throw it a million miles, they tend to get that about fairly easily. People seem to pick it up quite well once they've got those drills, and just keep encouraging them to do it. Even some of my athletes, you see them, they're just practicing getting that flick off the finger, even though they've been throwing for a few years. It's a fundamental, and we just need to keep working on it. And there's nothing to be, just to encourage them to get that, because the release, if it spins properly, can add meters onto your throw. So it is quite an important one.